Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Lisa Wortlaw. I will be moderating the amazing session we have lined up for you all today on AI-powered partnership, how to build resilient business strategies of the future. I can't wait to introduce all of our guests and have them give you a little bit of background, but just highlight who's joining us today before they introduce themselves and go through more details on their thoughts about the topic at hand. We have Ken Worsley joining us as the Chief Operating Officer of Nova Mutual. Audrey Davis joining us, AVP Strategy, In-Plan and Choices Client Experience with Sun Life. And Raj Yutraja, VP Tech and Chief Information Security Officer of Gore Mutual Insurance. So welcome to all of our amazing Canadian colleagues. Can't wait to get into this discussion with you all. As a kind of teaser and leading up to Future of Insurance Canada, which will be hosted by Reuters Events Insurance, November 15th and November 16th. We're looking forward to seeing you all there, and of course, continuing the dialogue from today. So let's dive into our discussion today. You know, clearly, carriers not only face economic headwinds today, but we've got a rapidly evolving risk landscape, meaning traditional business strategies are no longer able to guarantee market success. AI can enhance the ability to cope with unprecedented disruption by shrinking distribution times, predicting preferences, and fine-tuning fraud prevention. However, to win in a modern economy, carriers must leverage AI and partnerships to drive innovation efficiency, including resilience. I can't wait to talk to the team today about how we structure these partnerships, because they can't be all or nothing. So let's talk about the three key elements. Culture of innovation. So how do we focus these resilient business strategies of the future, creating a culture of innovation? So how do we forge this new environment where the entrepreneurial employee or an entrepreneur can flourish? How do we push ahead of competition through agile or dynamic business strategies that can ground us in visionary thinking and pioneer organizational transformation, failing fast, pivoting in this new dynamic world? The second area of focus will be from transactional to transformative. How do we prioritize strategic alignment partnerships in order to maximize ROI outcomes across all functions? Moving away from this transformation as this once and done, and of course it's always been iterative, but how do we create and forge these lifelong partnerships and relationships, including coupling and decoupling the technology and the AI componentry in a way that serves us from a resilient business strategy? And then the third area that we will wind this around with is, how do we move from hype into headway? So how do we unlock the hype of AI into the practical application of AI? How do we ensure we remove and eliminate menial tasks and drive a more sophisticated risk undertaking, again, focus on resilience? So with that, thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm Lisa Wardlaw. I'll be your moderator for this session. I'd love to turn it over to Ken Worsley to introduce himself, as well as give you a little bit of his framing on these three key elements of AI-powered partnerships.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ken Worsley, COO of Nova Mutual here in Ontario, Canada. Thank you to the group. I'm really looking forward to this. I think I'm going to learn a lot from all of you. I think when you look at this whole journey, no doubt there's been a great deal of study on AI and how it impacts P&C world and other insurance, and really any segment as well. But I kind of bring it back to the customer, and fundamentally, insurance really, for 90% of the population, is a begrudging purchase, right? It's bought out of regulation, it's bought out of contract, or it's bought out of fear. There's no tactile response to it, nothing to use and feel, and really, you only use it when something bad happens to you. We're all neck deep in this insurance ocean, and our customers really dip their toe in that ocean once or twice a year. We're almost too close to it when we start talking about the customer experience. So I take it from AI and how it can improve the customer experience, right? So if that is all true, how does AI make that customer experience better beyond making our systems better? Now, making our systems more efficient will absolutely have a positive impact on the customer for sure. But there's the portfolio view and the customer view in AI. So the customer experience really is about how do we approach and seek out those potential customers, target marketing, pre-qualification. There's privacy issues to be solved for sure. And then you mentioned it, Lisa, embedded coverages and strategic partnerships are absolutely key. And then what value add can we bring in some of that, and how AI can pull that all together for loyalty buying groups and that value add to that customer. And then there's the portfolio management view of AI in this, rate and inflation taking based on that specific risk. It doesn't have to be broad brushstrokes, right? Quality assurance and underwriting. AI can pick out things. The loss prevention side, there's huge runway for this. AI inspections, forward-looking infrared, auto-extinguishing things, automatic shutoffs, real-time loss prevention can happen with AI. Claim settlement is a huge thing. You talk about parametric type payments for certain things. That can be pushed out with AI. Fraud detection and prevention is a huge field that will absolutely expand. When we talk about insurance in Canada, auto insurance in particular, it's a very complex product. And it can have life-altering financial, physical, and mental implications if you don't have the right product, or you didn't purchase the right product, or didn't understand the product. So although the lines and coverage can be very complex with different terms and conditions that at times really aren't well explained, and people in general don't want to spend the time to learn about the insurance product, they rely on a trusted expert or an advocate. And this is where I think AI can really be that advocate. And it can create intuitive assistance to insurance sellers and buyers, right? Automatically. So again, how do we make that buying experience better, right? Right now, there's direct writers that can give you a personal and auto policy on one policy based on your name and address and birthday. That's sort of the power. And then how do you then take that segmentation and build off of that to really have a focused product for that client that's really tailor-made for them, almost a good, better, best approach. And AI can take that and quickly show like a graphical interface around the differences, because nobody wants to sit and read wordings and exclusions. Something quick that's easy to understand. So really, it's getting that feeling of what they bought. It's more important. It's what they bought is important, but more why they bought it, and that's the value add of why they bought this, because they can then say, oh, this is why I bought this insurance, right? And AI can bring some of that to the table. And we talked about the segmentation, and you mentioned adding strategic partnerships to embed other products, travel, cyber, roadside assistance, partner with life, health, wealth, medical, dental, and really getting more share of that customer's insurance spend. And then that leads to retention, right? That stickiness is really important. So I think, there's a lot of runway for this to help ease that and segment those customers and really create, again, that stickiness that also encompasses a real value proposition.
So I'm still, Ken, taken by your first lead in about it's a begrudging product, right? And I used to say that, I often say, I said it at breakfast this morning with some investors, that insurance is created like this sense of duress or duty, like a responsible person does this. And the gentleman sitting across from me was like, yeah, because we were talking about this Platonic shift, and I want to kind of follow back up on some of the things you're talking about where AI and these powered partnerships can support, right? So I started calling it this Platonic shift, and consumers no longer feel that they need insurance. What we're missing is the element of desirability. So how do consumers, I call it the new 4-letter word, but how do they want insurance? And you very amazingly led into that, and I was like, oh, we've never had that conversation. But it's fascinating with I just wrote down 10 things that you talked about, but I kind of would then lift it up to you started with why, and not to get too Simon Sinek on this, but the power of why connected to the desirability or the want. And then what I heard you say was, of course, very elegantly leveraging the power of linguistics, of large language models, of intuitiveness, of hyper personalization, like how to bring this back like core and center. So I'm curious to know, what stage are you all in with these powered partnerships? Are you, kind of exploring them? Are you, in the phase where you're like, how do I get those to market fast? Because everything you mentioned, like intuitive understanding of policy terms and conditions, portfolio, efficiency, all the things, what stage are you all in terms of your maturity on this?
Well, I'll speak to, our company, Nova. We're a small Ontario-based mutual, but these are the things I always phrase it in, we need to look 12 yards out, not 12 inches out, right? This is the 12-yard view.
You're not going to say skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's at. Come on.
There's that too. I'll use the CFL. Yeah.
I really wanted the hockey analogy.
Yeah. Well, you're right though, right? I mean, and you mentioned it. It's an iterative process, right? Right now we're going through a policy administration system transformation, and anybody who's gone through that knows that takes up everything. You can't do anything else until you do that. So it's an iterative process, but we're beginning the journey, and I like to think we're starting to think about these things to bring them to fruition as fast as we can. But it is a process.
Yeah. No, I love that. Well, thank you for those insights. So let's swing the dial over a little bit to Raj. I would love to hear your thoughts on these 3 key elements, and then we're going to move from Raj to Audrey. And then a promise, audience, I forgot to tell you all this. If you're on and you're listening and you're enjoying this, please, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A function, and we will be coming around to answer your questions in real time momentarily. So Raj, would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Lisa. Hi, I'm Raj Utraja. I'm VP Technology at CISO at Gore Mutual. Gore is Canada's oldest 180-year-old organization, even older than Canada itself. And it's in the property and casualty market. I've been with Gore for around 3 years, mostly on the technology and on the security side, but before that, been on the finance side with TD, BMO, JP Morgan, and stuff. And AI is such a powerful innovation. I mean, it excites me and scares me within the same breath. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel, and I look forward to hearing more from Ken, Aubrey, and Lisa yourself. And with AI, I believe that on one hand, it brings enormous opportunity to insurers. On the other hand, it also brings new risk, because the technology itself being so powerful and new, we don't truly understand how the technology is shaping. And artificial intelligence, I mean, if you look at, before I talk about AI, you look at human species, that what makes us intelligent. I, as an individual, can see, but now you got computers who can see better. I can recognize objects, computer can recognize objects. If I'm speaking in a seminar with 1,000 people in the auditorium, probably the computers will be able to detect who those people are, do the facial recognition and get their biodata, while I might still be counting. So on one hand, it's matching the capability of a human, but on the other hand, it has exceeded it phenomenally well, right? I can hear, so can computers. I can hear, I can translate that internally, that what it means, but computers can hear and learn all those languages. I can sense that it's hot on what the air might feel like, but computers will tell me exactly what's the temperature and what's the composition of the air. So what you see is that, powered by AI, the technologies around us have progressed so much that is enormous possibility. I mean, we all have heard ChatGPT, that how it can generate real life text. And you combine other capabilities of computer vision, sensor, what you can hear, and then combine it with the generative AI. Now computers can produce what I'm about to say or what I would have said and can even draw it in pictures, so it has taken it completely to a different level, right? So, but now you're thinking that, say, hey, you're insurer, that how do you live in this world? How do you utilize this technology? How do you make sure you do not bring additional risk and all, right? So what do you do as an insurer to be operating in this world, right? But I believe that insurers exist because there is risk. If there was no risk, there would not have been a need for an insurance organization, right? And so when these new risks and new opportunities come, then insurers got to be ahead of the curve in understanding that risk, pricing that risk, and packaging that risk as a product, so that we can thrive uh, in future. But coming back to what can an organization do? So we use a 3-step framework, for how to be in this world. And step 1 is embrace. So when we recognize that this is one of the most powerful phenomena, technology and otherwise, happening around us, then how as an organization we embrace this phenomena? How do we do exploration, or how are we cautiously utilizing or experimenting these capabilities? Step 2 is move from admiration to experimentation. So I see a lot of companies, I see a lot of panels where we are admiring the capabilities, but the plan from admiration to experimentation needs to be charted out if you want to be ahead of the curve in this. And experimentation, like the basic experimentation, I see people asking questions on Bing Chat or creating an account on Chat GPT. That's good, that's utilization, but we need to take experimentation beyond just
We want to see
utilization
your
of
history
those
on Chat GPT questions, just for the record. Inquiring minds want to know.
Yes, exactly. And then third is that build a roadmap. I mean, we all have roadmaps, we all have product roadmaps, technology roadmaps, but AI roadmaps is different from a regular technology roadmap or a product roadmap, because we all have different capabilities, different technology system, different data system, different access to skills and resources. So but a roadmap, a specific AI roadmap, is as crucial for an insurer as other product roadmap or technology roadmap, because the way this technology is shaping is beyond belief. Now, how do we get the partner ecosystem into this? Is that each partner has different capabilities. And we hear a lot of pitches where partners claim that they got AI in their product, and we respect that. But not all models are same. And if it's just a call to open AI to see what that open AI can do, that's different than having core capabilities inside the partner ecosystem, right? So I think we're all in a very different side of technology innovation, and it's very exciting. So I'll take a pause, and
Yeah.
Lisa, in case there is
No,
anything.
you paused right at the place where I wanted to ask you just a quick question before we move on to Audrey's kind of reaction to these 3 things. And clearly, given your role as Chief Information Security Officer, I find this really interesting. And I was on just a panel last week where we were talking about the partnership strategy when it comes to OpenAI. And it's one thing to say, there was almost like 2 divides. Like, one is I'm going to partner with people to kind of bring that capability forward. And then the other distinct perspective was, I want all AI to almost be internal, and I want the tech and the partners that I partner with to be composable and decomposable, so that I'm not opening myself up to, I'll call it like unnecessary risk that I don't embrace because I want
Yes.
to have like whatever. So do you have any, and again, I know we're going to get into the questions in a minute, but I'd love to just hear your quick thought to that, because I think that's an interesting perspective for the audience, right?
Yes, so true, because what I said, it excites me and scares me in the same breath. Like if you
Right.
ask OpenAI, what's the explainability of their LLM model, is 2 or 3% explainability, right? So when we look at insurers, that how do you price, we go to regulators, we explain exactly how we're going to price a product, how we're going to service the product and our this, right? So essentially, a lot of unintended risk is going to come to insurers when they start experimenting it. But the only way to be living in that world is to understand that risk and address that risk through strategy and other review processes.
Yeah. So I think the heads up to partners
Yes.
is, while it's I would say like everyone is like, I have AI, I have Gen AI, I have something in there. It's become like the latest valuation, shiny globe. But really understanding the composability and the decomposability and explainability of what you're adding in, and can that be, if you will, kind of ring fence off if needed to be by a carrier. So I love
Yeah.
that lens,
Yeah.
Raj. So moving over to Audrey. Audrey, would love your reaction to these first three elements, and clearly we're happy for you to be joining us today.
Thank you very much. So Audrey Davis, I'm based in Montreal and I work with Sun Life. I'm going to really focus more on the kind of strategic decision making and that sort of elements of the question, because I think, first of all, that's where my expertise is, right? I think when we think about AI and now all these new kinds of generative AIs, things like that, I think we have to be very cognizant and really recognize what we don't know about them, right? And I think in strategy, this is one of my responsibilities, to make sure that we're sure about what we do know, but we're also sure about what we don't know, so that we can understand our blind spots, right? What's so exciting, I mean, obviously there's many things that are exciting about the capabilities that are emerging today, right? Already AI is so incredibly powerful, and now we've got this new generation of AI that's taking it a step beyond it. And there's, as Raji rightly pointed out, there's great things about that. There's things to maybe be a little bit afraid of as well. But I think, and I think we've all heard anecdotes and can start to understand what some of those possibilities are. But what's different now is that, this is one of the first times where it's actually creating things that we don't fully understand how it is doing it, right? These are tools that are in some ways more powerful than we expected. And again, even some of the experts, some of the people who built it don't understand, and we're surprised by the power of it. And that to me is fascinating and exciting, and I think it gives us a lot of reason to hope for all sorts of amazing outcomes, even socially, so beyond just our businesses. When you think of the capabilities in the medical field, the environment, right? Education, all of these kinds of things. I mean, it's almost promising to solve some of these problems. Of course, at the same time, it's so easy to use, so powerful, and so accessible to everyone that there's obviously potential for other things to be happening that aren't necessarily where we want things to go. So my role really is about kind of trying to balance all of these different things. And in this sort of space of ambiguity, how do we advise our leaders, right? How do we advise our leaders on what kind of decisions to make, where to take the leap, and where we might want to kind of step back a little bit from the hype? I think, one of the questions I think that it's always been there, but I think is exceptionally important in this stage is, how can our organizations use this kind of capability in a way that preserves our values as responsible corporate citizens, right? So yes, I think we know for sure that this will help us with productivity, right? It will help us do things that we weren't able to do before, data, and creating content and doing all this kind of things. But I think the more you read about it, the more you understand that this is going to have implications that we don't fully understand. And I think it introduces a really interesting dilemma, right? Again, the potential for shareholder value, massive. We're all extremely excited. That's why we're having all of these webinars. That's why everybody's talking about this. That's why we have so many people here today. We're fascinated by this, and we want to know how we can use it to our own benefit. The AI is actually smarter than we are now, right? Which is quite fascinating.
Definitely better memory recall than we do, for sure. Yes. Right, Audrey?
Yeah, like it's actually gotten better, and we're not sure exactly how it's doing that. We're making big decisions based on our understanding of these capabilities and what this AI is telling us, right? Again, very exciting, but we need to be aware of what the potential downsides are of that. And the technology is advancing so quickly that our decision-making and risk control probably won't be able to keep up effectively. I don't know about your organizations, but for us, managing risk, making decisions, it's not something that always happens in a day, right? It can take weeks and sometimes months. And,
years, sometimes.
Yeah, it can take, yeah. So, I mean, it can take a long time. And so I think we need to think about that as well. The decisions that we make today are going to have implications in the future. And that technology is going to be racing in the back. I heard one anecdote about a recent machine that was able to build the previous chess playing machine. It learned in 3 moves how to do it. That we hadn't. I think if I remember the anecdote correctly, previous games had not been input into the system, just the rules of the game, and it learned in 3 games how to beat these other super powerful computers, right? So that's how quickly it's learning and creating new insights. I think sort of from a human perspective, and I go back, Ken, to what you were saying when you were saying, you know, we really have to think about this, how it can benefit the client. And I completely agree with that. I think, yes, the customer, also the human being that's there, right? Like, I think we can sometimes look at the client as, you know, sort of single faceted, but there's sort of the whole human and social component. I think as responsible corporate citizens, we have to think about the decisions that we're making and the relationship. And I'm not going to say conflict, maybe it's a tension between the technologies that we're creating and the society that we're striving to build, right? Or the culture that we're striving to build, right? I think, you know, we've seen it, the impact already, and again, already, just with the AI that already exists, of how it influences our social fabric, right? And even can exert control and sort of change the way that we think about things. And, you know, I was thinking about how, how the creation of content and even replicating human beings and human voices. I'll give out just a popular example. I don't know if anybody's seen the great documentary, the Andy Warhol documentary. I think it was on Netflix, and it's about his diaries. And they actually used AI to recreate his voice, so it sounds as though he himself is reading his own diaries, right? Which is appropriate for Andy Warhol for all sorts of reasons, because he was so excited about technology and popular culture and things. So that makes sense for him. But the implications of that, of believing that somebody is saying something when they actually didn't say it, right? Or we were hearing about, the Hollywood strikes, where actors are being, their physical person is essentially being replicated so that the studios don't have to pay as much. There's real world implications of this, and it influences how we trust the information that we're getting. And so us as sort of representatives or advisors to corporations on how we use this, we have to see how we're influencing the social fabric, I think. So the question that I would pose is, how do we capitalize on this in a way that preserves those values, which, you know, may include creativity, because it's coming after the creative jobs a lot of the time, critical thinking, right? The environment, diversity, equity, inclusion. We see how AI is sort of perpetuating all sorts of biases and that sort of thing. So how do we preserve those values while capitalizing on it for our business, right? And I think in that same vein, kind of, we have to think about all the ways that we're going to benefit from it in terms of the productivity and that shareholder value. But we also equally, you know, as when we feel ourselves getting really excited about it, I think we also have to say, how might it, whether it's with our competitors or by our own doing, how might it actually destroy our business model, right? What are we putting at risk? So I think those are the things
love that
I
connected to resilience, for sure. And you reminded me, there's a good friend of mine who works at a resilience startup, and we talk about this being the dawning of co-creation, literally co-creation. So I love how you frame that up, because we can't pull against it, but we can't let it in essence do whatever. It's really that, I mean, we would call it like human-centered, but how do we co-create the world that we want to be in the future? So I love that perspective that you're bringing in terms of like, how do we connect that to our decision making, which by definition is very intentional. So thank you for all three of you for that amazing lead in to our questions. So the first question I'd like to pose to the three of you is, how can carriers create a culture of innovation within your organization to harness the power of AI? And, I don't know if anyone wants to take that first, but would love to hear from all three of you on that.
I'll jump in real quick at a few thoughts. Insurance previously was seen as a very old, stodgy, stubborn industry. Not a lot of innovation, but you've seen tons now over the past little bit. So when you talk about culture, it has to be the culture of creation and exploration now, and it wasn't before. You know, you look at the product journeys some are on, and the IT journeys some are on. Is really impressive. I'm probably a little bit of a broken record, but it has to be rooted in the customer. I still go back, I've had this conversation with many people, you know, every place I work, you know, we're not IT companies, we're not marketing communication companies, we're insurance companies. They all support that, but we have to sell insurance to stay viable. And you know how we do that has to be easy, has to be profitable, has to be predictive, and all of those things. But that culture has to be ingrained from basically the mailroom to the CEO office. It has to be across all facets of the organization.
Yes, I agree. I'll add to that as well. I think one of the things that I would recommend is sort of how you frame the problem statement, right? Innovation is often in relation to some kind of a stated problem, which typically has been very business centered. So just oversimplify, you know, how do we improve productivity? Whatever it is. I think, again, we have to phrase the question, how do we improve productivity in a way that preserves, and then name some of the values that you need to have, right? And I think that helps us to better frame the question so that we're not forgetting, we're not sort of forgetting what are some of those critical skill sets and values that make the company, right? And it helps people to think within a more tightly framed out problem, right? Innovation occurs when there's something that is much more structured. So I think that really helps as well.
Thank you, Ken. Audrey, you know, I like to add, and I speak this with my team. There are very few companies that would actually have teams, and they'll tell to the teams, you know, go innovate, you know, because there are R&D companies in drug makers and all, right? But we all have opportunity in whatever we do, you know, to do that process, do that activity, do that product design and things differently. Now, how do we do that differently is by staying ahead of the technology curve, but understanding the technology capabilities, which is in this case is AI, because we know that AI and machine learning and all, they'll be able to impact the claims journey, the underwriting process, the pricing sophistication, customer journey through phone channels and all. So there are innovation opportunities in practically everything that we do on the insurance organization. But the approach needs to be that what can I do differently in my process tomorrow that I did today, being the innovation side.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I kind of love the way we started on like creation, exploration, kind of Audrey, that like we've almost forgotten that we've had to add the ... because just intuitively it was framed and we didn't have to think of the ... So I call it that cognitive overt intentionality has to come. We have to insert the ... now, whereas before we didn't. And then Raj, like the how we connect all that, right? And that really getting that output orientation, which kind of brings me, there's a couple questions I want to have, and I've been reading, thank you audience, I've kind of been reading through some of the Q&A, so we're going to get to those in a minute. But like, how can carriers, and I'm going to say this for myself, right? I've often thought our industry is amazing because we're such a linear industry, full of mathematicians, statisticians. Even if you're creative in insurance, you like a little bit of linearity because it requires, I call it like a lot of longitude. And latitude, there's like something like going this way that we've all kind of had to form. And, you know, Audrey, like in the strategy roles and things like that, we kind of have to kind of basically awaken that going across vertical. So connecting the partnership to the employees of, you know, insurance carriers and that kind of, if you will, grounding in linearity and almost verticalization, right? You know, Raj, I just heard you say like claims and underwriting, et cetera. But now with the power of AI, those things are going to become much more humanistic in an interesting way, meaning they're not going to be as functional or vertical. They're not going to be as linear. So my point is, how are we going to create this dexterity and entrepreneurial thinking among employees? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'll go first. You know, one change that's happening in the insurance industry of late is the insurtechs coming in. So what insurtechs have done, they have opened up that how do we view a traditional problem through a different lens. So it has done two things. That one, that the teams within an insurance carrier, they're also now seeing that how a problem could be approached differently. But you're right that traditionally, and Ken mentioned it, that traditionally we have been in an environment where we want to be totally predictable. And with AI, where the explainability is 2%, 3%, how do we move from a totally predictable algorithms to a unexplainable real is something that we need to navigate through. But we're creating guarded awareness of this technology within our teams and making sure that the knowledge is spread out so that teams could make sure they pick the appropriate idea, to experiment in the coming time.
At least, Lisa, you mentioned something before, and it sort of triggered this. It's whenever you make a change like this and how do you bring it into the organization, it's about, at least for me, I think there's a lot of, with AI and a lot of the science and that is transpiring, I almost call it an arrogance of intelligence. This is what it is, and it will always be this, and this is what it is, and it can't not be this. Well, in insurance, yeah, it can be something else, and it usually is something else at certain times. We can't, insurances don't put all your eggs in one basket. We can't take this as this is the golden light that everybody will shine on. No, there's always something. So there's always another facet to this thing. We can't take it for granted that this is always right all the time. That's a little bit of a worry I have with some of this. And then the employees will see some of that and say, well, you're telling me this, but I know it's this because I do this every day. You don't.
Yeah.
You do it once every 2 quarters or something.
It's so interesting, Ken, side note, I was on a discussion yesterday with an AI service provider, and they were explaining to me how the model learns, like, the human can go in and say, no, I don't want it to be this, I want it to be that. And the model will train and learn on that. And I said immediately, like, well, what if I don't want the model to train on everything everybody did? And that could be based on a certain behavior or a certain thing that I want it to be maybe codified, or it could be that I want certain people to be more human decision based and I don't want the model to ever learn that, or it could be that those individuals, whatever, they did it a way that I didn't want my future organization to do it. And so I was asking all those questions, and we've yet to see that level of sophistication and some of the, I call it the switch tracks or the bifurcation in terms of training. It's kind of like it can either learn on X or it can learn on Y. And so that's some of the things I think can getting to where you were saying are going to occur too. And Audrey, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Sorry, I just thought that was so interesting.
No, it is. And I think you're bringing up an excellent point, which is around, we can't make decisions for the longer term based on what we understand about the AI today, right? I think, as you're talking, I mean, there are certain things that, and it happens, I think our trust in these systems happens somewhat slowly, but maybe even quicker than we'd like, right? So I think it's a slippery slope. We'll start to automate certain things today and kind of test it out and make sure that it works, right? And as you say, some of those things we're sort of still saying, well, yes, we still want some human interaction, or the human is going to always, we're going to say today that the human is always going to be the final step before we push send on that automatically generated email or something like that, right? 5 years from now, what does that look like, right? And then 10 years from now. And I think what's going to be interesting in 10 years' time is that today the AI is starting to create new content, again, something it's never been able to do before, based on content, essentially like, hundreds of years of human created content. In about 5 or 10 years' time, that won't be the case. It will be creating content based on its own content, And so again, these are some, I mean, it's not to go down sort of this pessimistic path. I just think we need to be aware of the kinds of decisions that we're making today and where that human being fits into it, and how these tools are being employed to actually support us and again deliver the society that we're trying to be a part of, right? So I think it does come back to that, and I think where I started off with, I think we do need to, on some level, sort of surf the hype a little bit because it is so exciting and the potential is so massive. But I think we need to do that with just a little bit of awareness of what are the things that we need to preserve, right? Because it's so easy to say, like we can automate the call center completely, practically, like within the space of the next few years, we may, it's going to be able to do a lot of that stuff, right? And so we just need to think about the implications of that and what we actually are trading in.
When I think you said prior to, when we were backstage getting ready to count it down to go live, you said you had an art background. I came from liberal arts too.
Yes.
And one of my favorite aspirational leaders in, I'll call it venture fund investing, wrote a book many years ago called Fuzzies and Techies. This is getting to this employee question that I see a lot of people talking about, why the liberal arts will rule the digital world. And the thing that perplexed me about that book, as soon as I read it, I was obsessed with it. The author's name is Scott Hartley. And I called him. He was gracious enough to meet with me. And I'm like, have you ever thought of how to apply this to linear industries? And this was well before OpenAI. I mean, I can't even remember when he released the book. And he's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, do we have enough art, liberal arts, sciences in, and of course I was thinking about insurance because that's where I come from. And I was like, and to apply that cognitive dexterity and to all the points you all mentioned, as we think about this, like engaging employees, humans will always need to be in the loop, but probably in a different way than the linear processes and procedures we had historically. So I like to think in it as maybe like we're moving people more into like the aspect, if we compare this like medical, like more like doing brain surgery all the time, like the very intense, like very high end, highly engaging activation, less of maybe the general practitioner things.
Yes.
And so like, how does that work in the future world? So I think you all highlighted that. And I wanted to take a couple of questions from the audience. And I'm going to bundle some of these together. So if you've asked the question, I'm trying to kind of loop them together so we get through everyone's questions with these amazing thought leaders we have in front of us right now. But there's a lot coming through on, okay, yes, AI, yes, hype. But how do we handle the intelligent enterprise? How do we get use cases with something that has limited case studies? And then connecting that, I'm going to kind of do a 2 or 3 in 1. Connecting that to, there were a lot of questions coming in about, well, what about my data strategy and these internal challenges? It's always funny. We always come back to data. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you weave a strategy, partnership strategy, internal strategy around like an emerging tech with limited practical deployed use cases, connecting that to our internal challenges around data and then stakeholders. So yeah, like maybe Ken, if you have any thoughts to lead us off on that one.
Well, we're going through a little bit of this now. It's the data, absolutely. But that cuts both ways. Everybody knows, if your data is no good or if you don't have enough of it, the outcome isn't going to be any good. So you have to buy it or lease it or whatever you do, you borrow it. But how do you prove that that's any better than yours? There's a lot of analysis that has to go into that before you go anywhere. But once you get to a point where you do trust the data that you have and you're able to gather, then you can build that out. And that journey, is founded in some sense of security because you get it. So that you get buy-in easier from your employees and things like that, right? The outcomes then are more sure, I guess, as tying back to again, that employee experience. There's a lot of questions in there about how it's going to affect employees too. But yeah, it's just that is making sure the data quality is there. And this is nothing new or revolutionary. It just has to be there. And without it, the whole thing falls apart. And there's a few questions in there about that. And that's another worry for me. And some of the other comments, I don't want to derail it, but regulation of this is coming at some point too. So
yeah, for sure. I don't know, Roger, Audrey, do you all have anything on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think, data strategy, AI does not replace the data strategy. In fact, it strengthens the importance of why we need a robust data strategy. And the cost of data storage in past 20 years has significantly gone down, right? And the pace at which the data is now being generated, that's essentially the key ingredient on how AI is going to be able to predict things faster, quicker, or more efficiently. Audrey had an amazing point that if computers are generating the data and they're training themselves on the same data, then does it get us to this technology singularity that we talk about? And that's a huge risk, right? That's there. But the sensors, IoTs, and other smart homes, smart cars, and other transmitting data every second, a robust data strategy, along with computing and these algorithms, I think it's going to change a lot of how we base our decisioning on.
Yeah, I was only going to add, I think the best way is to start with something that you know more about. So you don't necessarily have to adopt the most advanced AI as your first use case test, right? Start wherever you are today. I would say, what is the next logical step for your business, right? And I think it's important to understand, yes, what the capabilities are and where you're going. But I don't think it's necessarily urgent to make a wild leap into some of the, into some of the hype and some of the amazing things that we're all getting excited about. Even just, again, today's AI is already so powerful. And I think, again, I think the point of, you have to build your data set and you have to have that right data there to begin with, or to be able to purchase it. But yeah, it's smaller steps, I think, a whole series of them, even in the larger organizations. I mean, it's one of the ways that Sun Life is approaching it as well, is sort of, I was speaking to one of my colleagues, he had a great point. I'll say the note, we're looking, the success is really about just doing a little bit better than what we do today. So goal is not perfection, but to exceed what we do today, right? Which I think is really the right way to look at it. Is this going to make it better, right?
Yeah.
And you have to define what better means. But yeah, is it going to make it a little bit better? It doesn't have to solve all of the world's problems in one go.
And I totally agree with what you all are saying. And I think another interesting lens to this is, and it connects into resilience, layering in the aspect of sustainability and kind of conscientiousness of design. So, I mean, if we think about it, and I actually spent a lot of time saying, like, what we did when we moved to the cloud, and we continue, like, yes, we moved to the cloud, but we continue to kind of like ETL everything. And, if we start to think about training models, we start to think about the data needed in models, and we're going to segue into partnerships in a minute. We also need to layer in like this intentionality of sustainability and resilience in how we design this, because, I'm sure you all have seen some of the statistics on what OpenAI is costing a day to compute and run. And so I can't help but wonder, Ken, not only to your point about regulation, but also about sustainability. And I'm connecting that to data strategy because, many of us maybe move to like leaving data at rest, maybe some mesh strategy, but predominantly we're all still moving data into like a cloud version of a data warehouse, right? But really, I think now with AI and the models that we can train, we're going to have to start looking at partners and our own selves on how do we, like wearables, I have my ring on today, my Oura ring, but how do we leave data where it is, protecting privacy, data sovereignty, and still able to learn from that? And so I open that up to kind of lead into this next question, which there's quite a few questions about how do we actually partner? So, and I gave a little bit of a teaser in this when you all were doing your intros. Is it like partner to get the AI or the technology advancement? Is it we're going to create the closed circuit within the open AI so that we have control? And I would love to hear your thoughts on partnerships and how you forge and manage those in this new era. Like, what are the things that you all are looking at right now?
That's a huge question.
We're looking at all of it.
Yeah, like in terms of partnerships, I don't know that anything is off the table to a certain extent. You're going to go with what works and what is cost effective. And to your point before, and I think Audrey said it. It can create artwork. Well, how does that affect copyright? And all that falls in there with regulation, right? I think we got to get, again, foundationally, who owns this data? You got a ring on there and a watch. Who owns that? Do you own it? Does Apple own it? Who gets to use it? And then you know, can your life insurance provider all of a sudden access that and then change your rates because now you didn't do enough steps that day, right? Like, where does this go? I think there has to be some guardrails. And I know right now it's the wild, wild west. I just think there has to be some guardrails. Otherwise, this can go sideways in a real hurry. I know that doesn't answer your question, but
yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think, you know, I think I'm really stuck on the privacy piece, and
yeah,
you know, it both I'd say of like our clients, but also of the business and the business strategy, right? And I think, you know, one example that just kept popping up is that, you know, on the Sun Life computers, for example, we cannot access the chat GPTs or anything like that because the business wants to prevent people from, you know, for example, you know, I'll just give a random example. If you're creating marketing material or something like that, and you want to put it into the chat GPT, we don't know where that information is going, right? Or who is able to see it. And we don't want anything that we need to have protected. We need to make sure that we're protecting our clients from all of this, right? Until we know exactly where it's going. We can't have people sort of, you know, saying, you know, create for me, you know, the package that talks about your insurance portfolio, right? Because that we don't know where that information is going. So I think we have to, I think that point about who owns the data, and until we know for sure, we're not going to gamble with anybody's information, right?
This kind of gets into this open and closed loop, right? Which is and by the way, not that it wouldn't be a violation of personal policy, but you think that person's not opening up their phone and kind of using some tips and tricks, not the whole thing, but like, come on, like we are, but to your point, we're not doing it holistically, and we're doing it like maybe like a synonym or thesaurus.
We're controlling within our scope of control. Exactly. I think, you know, and I think that, and again, I think that points to some of the challenges, right? So as we're doing this, right, I think we have to be also thinking about all of these other things. We talked about it before, is that a lot of this is going to be outside of our control, right? A lot of this is even the stuff that's in our control, we don't know, like we don't know how unwieldy this might be in the future. But, you know, this is all happening so fast and it's so democratic that everybody can use it. And so this is, again, why we have to really think about the implication of this. It has impact on who has access to which information now, right? Because if you're somebody who, you know, needed government clearance before, right? Or didn't need government clearance before to be able to access the content, maybe now you do, right?
Right.
Because we need to be able to control our clients' data. We need to be able to control our own internal strategy information. We need to be able to control all of the things that we keep confidential. And with this new world, I mean, it's always been possible for people to, you know, transfer things to their personal email address and email it out. We really need to do our best to control all of that.
Right. For sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with Ken and Audrey. You know, like the data control, security, privacy is insurers' top concern. So we need to be ahead of the curve, you know, on that, because it's not our data. It's the data for our policyholder, broker partners, and other that we are working on. And on your partner ecosystem question, Lisa, you know, we need to truly understand what capabilities the partners are bringing, and same on the security and privacy standpoint, what controls they have. Because insurers are dependent on our partners to bring in innovative capabilities, but also make sure that insurers' responsibility of data and privacy is also held up by the partner ecosystem that we utilize. I mean, we just got through a transformation project, and we brought in like 25 different integration for that transformation. Ken is on journey and is smiling. And we know, like, the more partners that you have in your ecosystem, the harder it becomes to govern and, you know, to make sure that you utilize the capability but keep risk and privacy at bay. So it's a very interesting challenge.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm reading some more of the questions. There was one in there. There's quite a few in there about, you know, frontline or like, okay. So on one hand, there's like, what are the risks? The concrete risks that we're seeing, like I think we're articulating some of them, like regulation, privacy, security concerns. Audrey mentioned like, well, you can't use it on the computer, but you can't actually control what someone is not doing on the computer. I mean, it's just different now. I mean, it's a lot more open. It's become democratized. But there's another question that I want to weave in here. That's like, well, what about profit? Like, isn't profit central to what we're doing as insurers. I would say sustainable profit, because we have to be there for a very, very, very long duration, which is why insurers have maybe been criticized as being slow moving or whatever. I mean, we're a very duration centric industry, because we buy the kind of vanilla investment of society to back our policyholders' returns on capital as well as our shareholders. But what do you all think about AI partnerships and strategies for the future, and how it connects to profit emergence, especially in light of where we've been with the economic conditions, the geopolitical conditions, connecting to, of course, NatCat? Are we going to see some of these AI partnerships to support profit resilience?
I'll jump in real quick. Yes, and this is huge. You could spend an hour on this alone, this topic, right?
And we don't have that much time.
So profit is there's two things there. And I'll get on my mutual soapbox with Raj. The mutual industry has a different profit need than the stock companies do. We tend to price our products to a break even. We don't need 15% ROE, right? Because we are owned by our members. But so one of the things I want to say is profit is important but we don't want to be seen to gouge either, especially on a regulated line. I think it's a little bit off to try to drive 15% ROE on something people have to buy, right? But anyways, I'll get off my soapbox there a little bit. But profit is important. It's just what level and what impact to the customer. Because from a mutual perspective, some of the small mutuals, how much can we invest in this technology until it affects our premiums we have to charge? Is it right for me to invest millions and millions of dollars if my now premium has to go up on average by 10%? And I don't know. That's something we struggle with. Profit's important. We have to make money to be sustainable, to your point.
Yeah, I'll support Ken. We need to be viable. We need to make sure we manage expenses, have efficient processes and all. But being a mutual organization, profit is not the key. And each of these innovation ideas are business case driven innovation ideas, which means that does it make sense for business, for our policyholders and stakeholders before we take that initiative?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I completely
Any different
agree.
perspective on
Yeah. No, I mean, I just don't think they're necessarily in conflict, right? I think, profit. I think maybe there have been examples where you put profit above all else. Obviously, it's a fundamental necessity of corporations, right? Like we have to generate profit, but as you say, the sustainability of that profit requires us potentially to kind of bring it down a notch or two in the next year, in the near term, right? In order to invest in that future. So I think it's always been that case. We have to, as with all of these other major decisions, all these other technological advances, balance the risk of what we're undertaking, right? And what is that sandbox that we're willing to kind of give up in order to invest? Sometimes we have to do things to compete, that we wouldn't do otherwise. Sometimes we have to do things just to as a part of compliance or something like that, right? So there's all sorts of different ways. Of course, profit is always kind of the end goal that we're after, but of course not at the cost. It goes back to that question: how do we deliver a profit of an acceptable level while maintaining or while delivering, on our values and our social responsibility and things like that, right? We have to look at our corporations like that now more than ever.
Yeah. I think it's, as we wrap up this very rich discussion, and to all your points, I think we could have had like a separate webinar on like maybe any of these audience Q&As that came through. And so unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna have time to answer the rest of them. But I think if we kind of like summarize this, right, it really, really, really comes down to what you all are saying, which is intentional co-creation and design focused on sustainability. And so it's allowing ourselves, the thing I loved about this conversation is that all three of you are leaning forward with a lot of intentionality and a lot of like, how do we bring this forward? Which, a lot of people might say insurance is a little stodgy, we might be slow to move, but everyone in this discussion has been saying, I'm embracing it. in some ways it's very, you know, tantalizing. I'm aware of the risk and I'm considering them with intention and with design. And you're trying to move your organizations forward, whether they're mutual organizations or not mutual organizations. And you know, if we really come back to me, just the call to action, I think the main call to action is you need to design your partnerships in tandem with your business strategy of the future. It's definitely not and I heard this implied in everything you all were saying. It is no longer a go it alone. I'm going to create everything in-house. I'm going to be the proprietary curator of all. It is, you're going to have partnerships. Those partnerships are going to need to be very curated. And so I think with all that, I want to say thank you to everyone. We're right up on time. I wanted to say thank you to Reuters for allowing us the benefit of having this conversation with these amazing leaders. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Raj. And again, if you're going to be in Canada, or if you'd love to come to Toronto, November 15th and 16th, we will be there for Future of Insurance Canada. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.